questions or opportunities for any players to come in and meet with him. He has already met with some of our players and talked to some of them about what was said. And I've been told those meetings went very, very well. And so I'm very pleased with that. And as he finished, he did the same thing. So, guys, please, any questions, come see me. Let's talk about that. And I thought it was good. That was well received. And we'll see.
I mean, he did what he had to do, and he's still our coach. You feel me? We go out here and play ball.
Does it impact the way you see things going forward at all?
Nah, man, I play football.
Ooh, that was interesting from Deron Payne there. You sort of see the way he's handling this, but Ryan, it looked like it bothers him a little bit. Listen, we weren't there for the apology, but hypothetically speaking, if you're a defensive player in that locker room, how do you handle this?
Well, I think the first thing is you understand there's a lot of people walking around that building that think that way. Jack Del Rio is not the only person that feels like what happened on January 6th was a dust-up, and that what happens in the wake of unarmed men being killed by police brutality and the things that ensue afterwards and that anger and that hurt and that pain are things we need to pay more attention to than that. He ain't the only one that feels that way. He's just the only one that was willing to say it out loud. And when I hear Ron Rivera speak that there's been conversation since, that's probably a good thing. But you can tell in Deron Payne's voice, in the way he answered, he's just there to play football. But that's the point I want to make. We walk around those locker rooms with people we disagree with, people who aren't our friends from different backgrounds, different beliefs. If they're willing to come to work hard, be respectful, put their hand in the pile, and try to get a W on the weekend, then you're going to play with them. So what you're going to do as a defensive player is you're going to walk into that meeting and treat Coach Jack Del Rio with the respect of being a coach. Now, beyond that, outside of that, you don't have to be friends. You don't have to laugh and play. You don't have to have a relationship, but you have to figure out a way to win football games, and that's what this team is going to do. And let me repeat this. Jack Del Rio is not the only person in that building that feels that way. He just said it. And when you're an African-American player or a minority player or a black player, when you walk into those buildings, you know that already. I actually rather Jack Del Rio come out and say it, so now I don't have to guess, let's go play football.
Well, if I'm in Washington, I'd rather he had not said it. Now, Jack Del Rio has freedom of speech just like everybody else. But for him to compare the wrongful killing of George Floyd in cold blood to what he called a dust-up, or what happened at the Capitol because the president was upset about the election results, is not just wild, it's irresponsible. How can you look those guys in the eyes that you're coaching that come from a predominantly black community, their own community, and tell them what you just said was, hey, it's okay? It's not okay. Those guys aren't going to give the extra effort for Jack Del Rio. They might give it for their family. Like Deron Payne said, he plays football, so he's going to give it for himself. He has a certain sense of pride about what he's doing, but they're not going to give that 120% effort for Jack Del Rio. And I just think as a football player and that football team in Washington that constantly is marred with controversy, Jack Del Rio just made it a lot harder for those guys to go to work without distraction. Now, as RC said, as a pro, you got to handle your business. You're going to show up, and we all have people that we work with that we don't like and we don't agree with their views on life, but you go to work and you get it done and be a pro. And I think that's what they have to take out of this. They're going to have to be professional, but they're not playing for Jack Del Rio. They're playing for each other.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned playing for each other. High expectations for that Washington defense last year. They didn't necessarily live up to it in the way that they would say, right, that they could have done. We'll see how that ends up going out on the field next season. And Jeff, another big question right now for Washington. Terry McLaurin not present for mandatory minicamp. Rivera said he thinks the talks on a new contract and the receiver are headed in the right direction, but what more are you hearing?
Well, that's a good thing that Ron Rivera thinks that, because this puts Washington in the very situation that many teams found themselves this year with the wide receiver market. We should point out that Terry McLaurin is entering the final year of his rookie deal. Below $3 million a year is what he is scheduled to earn. So this is the best comparison year is not Devontae Adams or Tyreek Hill, but rather A.J. Brown from that same class. The Tennessee Titans ultimately decided we don't want to deal with this negotiation. We're going to send him to Philadelphia. Philadelphia said we're happy to pay a guy like him $25 million a year over 4 years for a $100 million contract. So now Washington has to decide where they stand on what side of the coin. Are they the Titans or are they the Eagles? Do they want to pay him or do they want to send him elsewhere? And right now, it feels like, based on Ron Rivera's response, they at least want to try to keep him in Washington.
Yeah, Jeff, that's great insight there. And what I would just say is just another example of just bad business for Washington. Terry McLaurin is one of the most respected guys in that locker room. He's the best player that they have, the best offensive weapon. He never complains. He always supports the quarterback who's throwing him the football, and they should have already paid him. Now, Terry would have been a lot cheaper if they had paid him at the beginning of the offseason. But now, because of A.J. Brown, as Jeff Darlington mentioned, talk about Tyreek Hill, you talk about Stephon Diggs, Scary Terry's going to command a lot more money at this point, and I just think they could have went about this a much better way. You handle the players that treat you well and do well by your organization. You take care of that money, and right now it just looks like Scary Terry's going to be making some scary money here pretty soon, and he's earned every single penny of it.
Yeah, I mean, guys, the other thing, too, about this is the Carson Wentz piece of it, and wouldn't it be nice, a nice security blanket for him to know that you've got Terry McLaurin's just shored up there? Over the last 2 seasons, he has the lowest drop percentage among all wideouts that have at least 130 targets. Carson Wentz is like, please make this work for this guy.